I'm Shalina Tobin, aka Posh Nosh Gal, and today I'm with the fabulous Jeremy Lee. Jeremy is one of the restaurant industry's most flamboyant characters. Born in Dundee, he moved to London in the 80s and has appeared on our TV screens many times throughout his career. In 2012, he brought his unique flair and charm to the timeless Quo Vadis restaurant in London Soho, where he continues to be head chef today. Hi, Jeremy. How are you?
Very well, Shalina. Thank you. Blushing hugely at such a flattering introduction. Thank you. How are you today?
So, how's life in lockdown for you?
How is life in lockdown? Golly, well, like everyone, it's a curious dream state, a peculiar bubble, mix of hibernation and strange glee in the kitchen. The kitchen's been a phenomenal boon companion through all this. I have to say, I've blessed myself daily for choosing to become a cook over these many years, because the kitchen keeps me very occupied. So from that point of view, it's sort of extraordinary. Lots of reading in books and then doodling and thinking of recipes. And therefore I'm trying to cook them. One of the things that's been amazing, because the whole food community was thrown into such a tailspin after the moratorium, that we quickly started working with lots of our producers and suppliers who were all stocked up to the gunnels for restaurant supply and had the carpet pulled from under their feet as well. So I've been doing lots of work with Neil Yard Dairy and Brindisa and Bela Zoo and Natura to, make folk aware that now this remarkable thing, all this restaurant quality produce, which was normally very hard to get hold of on the street, is now readily available, which is remarkable.
Absolutely. And you're also cooking for the NHS as well. I've seen a few posts on your Instagram
Yes,
page.
it was very funny. There was we became very aware really early on that this enormous wealth of talent was at home, twiddling its thumbs, shocked and glazed eyes, going, what on earth just happened to our dear world? And there we were left high and dry, washed up on the shores of hibernation. And unable to do, you couldn't even contemplate worrying about our businesses because there was nothing we could do. Our hands were tied completely.
Yeah.
And brilliantly, the furlough had granted us a respite from the two tragic worries and concerns of all this. And one of the things that became very obvious very quickly was that an enormous amount of folk in the NHS were working round the clock to keep things going, and old people's homes and care homes, but further reaching as well. There were people, who were stranded at home, one-parent families, and folk in all manner of situations. And a brilliant charity called Deliver Aid was born by Jack and Will Ackman, who set up this extraordinary thing, and it's brilliant that you get the food. They arranged a delivery of packaging, and you cook at home, and it's very simple, very straightforward stuff, but lots of fresh veg and fruit and cheese and meat, so it's very nutritious and very wholesome. And I was able to get a few volunteers in here so that they weren't climbing the walls as well. We do it once a week, and it's 2 days of a bit of focus and generating a bit of adrenaline again in a week, which is brilliant.
Of course. Yeah, and giving back, which you're doing so well.
Well, bless you, thank you. Yes, indeed. There's a quaint satisfaction knowing you're doing something, stepping in the right direction.
Yeah, of course. And so, Jeremy, you grew up in Dundee in Scotland. Is that where your love for cooking began?
Do you know what, Shalina? I think it did. I lucked out having two parents who back then took food very, very seriously, which was not the norm, I have to say. Much as I hate that kind of chat, because it's of course, cooking at home is vital, and what shapes soul. But they really were. They thought nothing of jumping in a car because they lived in a very remote village outside Dundee, and went shopping all over Angus. And Angus is one of these little-known, remote east coasts of Scotland counties that has one of the greatest natural larders in the country, and so produce factored daily with us. And there was a wealth of bakers and greengrocers, and then the high street still had shops in them. So we became used to that very much, and Dad thought this, and Mum both felt this was a natural part of daily civilized life. and sitting down there entire brood and themselves to well-cooked, good food was something we did every day, and it remains so. And it's a food I cherish and hold dear still, and the
Right.
best memory I have.
And how often do you get to go back?
Well, I'm an orphan now, which is a bit rubbish. I miss them terribly, even though they drove me nuts. To quote the great Rolay Lee, you know. But we still have our house because our uncle very kindly stepped in and arranged that we would keep our home there.
Oh,
So my
wonderful.
sister's there during lockdown with her family. So it's very nice. So they're doing wonderful things in the garden and keeping that all ticking over. But I go back as and when. I tend to gravitate more towards the West Coast, which is where we spent a lot of our childhood, my childhood, summer holidays. And I love the islands passionately. So I tend to go there or really up into the wilds, into the highlands and beyond.
Yeah.
But what I generally like to do is return from those church journeys through Dundee and stop off there and buy a big bag of pies because I love them so much.
Well, I've actually heard some wonderful stories about your family holidays where you camp out on beaches. Tell us one of your fondest memories.
Oh, golly, I think when we were tiny, I think we used to take crofts on the island of Mull. But as we grew up, those crofts diminished in size shockingly, quite quickly. So Dad took us on great camping holidays, and the campsites on the Highland and the Hebrides are brilliant because you literally, you hear the sea, the waves crashing in. Because it's the Atlantic, the sun's, it is achingly beautiful, and the water's unbelievably cold. But once you get in, it's fantastic. And so shivery bites were the order of the day coming out of the cold. Mum had baked phenomenal amounts of stuff to take with her because it was 3 weeks just cooking in tents. So there was, and then you just shopped locally the whole time. And so Mum cooked like a demon. And it was delicious, wonderfully simple fare. In the days of great bacon and blocks of cheese and bread, and it was like a Wind in the Willows picnic being listed every day. They were really wonderful. But we would often sit down to a fire, crackling away, on which there'd be a little pot of something simmering, which was just magic. But just a great plate of lobsters, boiled simply or roast on the fire. And a mayonnaise that Mum had made, and that would be it. I mean, incredibly simple, but very good food.
And do you find that sort of way of cooking comes into actually your daily cooking now?
Gosh, yes, I think that's a very fair comment because I feel, your greatest critics and the biggest fanfare you can get is a thumbs up from your folks.
Yeah.
And so the food, because restaurants when I was a kid were terrible, and all we did was eat good food at home, and we never ate out in restaurants. I've often felt somehow, even though my feet are very much in an urban environment, deep in down in dirtier Soho. My head's always in the clouds and looking to the horizons on the countryside, and we have an incredible range of suppliers and producers throughout the country who send us gorgeous things from the most beautiful farms. And so it's a wonderful mix of urban and country and natural and cityfied, which it's interesting because you think the food you might think would be more at home in an inn, en route to Scotland, stopping off in somewhere in York. But actually it's the food you're most starved of in an urban environment. So it's sort of I think there's an interesting meeting of time and place and ingredients as they come in.
Yeah. So how did you find the transition when you moved to London? Because that's such a contrast.
Oh golly, it was in the height of the Cold War. I mean, I don't think anyone could wait to get out of their very bleak townships and get to town where there was something happening, because there wasn't a lot going on then. Interestingly, what I missed most was going shopping with Mum and Dad. But I was inured in the restaurant business almost immediately. It was an extraordinary time because Alistair Little was just emerging, Simon Hopkinson was emerging. Nick Lander had his wife Chances Robinson doing the wine list for Lascargo. She was just emerging. It was an extraordinary collection of people. Rick Stein was doing wonderful things in Cornwall, and Sean Hill was doing things in Gidley Park. There were small little pockets of people doing extraordinary things. And what was originally called modern European cooking was fast emerging as modern British cooking. which
Right.
then led to the next generation of British cooks, you know. And up came, you know, suddenly realizing, you know, that Britain had done its usual thing of taking utterly for granted, and in its most Protestant way possible, just go, oh, no, we, you know, it's just what we do here. But actually, we were sitting on an absolute goldmine of fantastic produce and amazing farmers. And folks started to bring these ingredients to the restaurants. And so Spanish food, which we knew nothing about, we were very naive then, even still to Italian food. It's hard to think back then. Well, French was still the order of the day, very much so, and very plain British cooking. And so it was a wonderful melting pot of all these things coming together at the same time. It was really amazing.
Yeah. So your first job in London was with Terence Conran at Bibendum. So that must have,
No,
that was an
funnily,
amazing
no.
start.
Oh, no. Well, no, it goes back a little bit. You know, my very first job was at Boodle's Club in St. James's as a commie chef.
Right. Okay.
About the size of Billy Bunter and as round, just like this, you know, just a great big doughboy. And that was my last days in classical cooking, which I'd been trained in. And I felt very much that my wants, you know, I was only 21, you know, and I had I wanted to see the world. And one of the other things that was emerging at the time was extraordinary catering companies. And friends of mine worked at this amazing one that had shops in Bow Lane and Covent Garden and Oxford. And so we cooked very bright modern food there. And I thought I'd give that a go. Well, while cooking there, we did a big dinner for this Holland Park grandee banker in his house. And it was a wild old affair and hilarious. And, you know, I had this little 4-burner to feed 60 people. And you're like, oh, God, how's this going to work? How do I do this? And such was the gratitude of man for doing a good job. I got given an enormous tip, which, of course, I then handed up to my bosses. God knows why. And their gratitude was such that they said, right, dinner's on us. Where would you like to go? And what had opened just in the last few weeks, it was Bibendum. And so we went to Bibendum to eat, and all the scales fell away from my eyes. And this I love, but you know, I want to cook this food. This is the food I always wanted to cook in restaurants and never had been able to before. And so I applied for a role in the kitchen, thinking, oh God, you know, wait for the clangor of no. But amazingly got taken in, and you know, as they say, never look back. There was an amazing. Many great friendships made there with many great folk, Terence and Simon and Henry and Matthew and Phil Howard and Bruce Poole and Lucy, you know, a whole raft of cooks there. It was quite an extraordinary kitchen.
And how would you describe your time with Simon Hopkinson?
Golly, I worked for one of the best chefs in the world and who became a great pal. And so I look back at it with the fondest of memories. And God knows he worked hard. It was, you know, it was full on there because it just never stopped at Bibendum. It was the most extraordinary, the most beautiful dining room in the most beautiful building. And it was an instant hit. So it hit the tarmac running and never stopped. And the dining room would be, you know, Elizabeth David at one table and Francis Bacon at another, wow. Lucian Freud at another, Terence at another, Paul Hamlin, who had created the whole building in the first place. I mean, it was amazing. And the produce was unbelievable. Yeah.
And your first role as head chef came after joining Blueprint Cafe in 1994. And you
sorry, it's very busy out there today. Lots going on. I left Bibendum to go and cook with Alistair Little, who was equally as wonderful and amazing, even though I got very different styles of restaurant. But in fact, I left Alistair to go and cook, become a head chef at my tiny little restaurant called Euphorium up in Upper Street in Islington. Okay. And it was, you know, an extraordinary instant hit, which was wonderful. But it was so small, it just got swamped in the trice, you know. Right. But Terence came to eat there, and the Blueprint had just come free. And he said, well, would you? And I went, I could. And so we shook hands, and that's how, having worked with Terence a lot at Bibendum, I got to know him very well at the Blueprint, and grew to love him very, very much. He was a very paternal figure in my life.
Right. And you were there for such a long time, 18 years. What did you love about it?
Wow, it's hilarious. As friends used to say, my darling, what on earth did you do? Lifers get less. And I went, I know. And I was offered other things, and there were conversations about doing other things. But I have to say, when you walked up the stairs of the Design Museum and through that massive Bauhaus glass staircase into this room flooded with light, overlooking the Pool of London, and there was the tower, and these huge East End skies.
Yeah.
And this beautiful, simple, classic, pure Terrace dining room.
Yeah.
It was a very tough act to follow. And in fact, funny, what I always said, I know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be a basement in Soho that beats this, you know. I'll have an amazing pile of bricks on top of it. And that's exactly what Quo Vadis was. And so I waited a long time, but it was worth the wait.
Yeah, well, I mean, was it a hard decision to make to leave?
It was terrible, but it was a decision that had kind of been made for me, really, because the Design Museum was, even back then, there had been huge movement made and plans made to move the Design Museum, and the blueprint was a vital part of that. And it was going to go to Kensington, and there was mutterings of taking a blueprint there, but that never quite happened. But it was the timing of Sam and Eddie Hart's offer to go and work at Quo Vadis you know, you just couldn't say no. There was no reason why you couldn't say no to this thing, you know.
Yeah, well, that must have been a really exciting moment for you. I mean, that was, you moved to Quo Vadis in 2012.
God, I know how the years fly by already. You know, in for another lifetime. You know, it seems to be what I do: a serial restaurant, serial kitchener. Yeah, there was a big thing of very few of these great old London venerables remain, and so the likelihood of another one ever coming up was, you know, not possible. And when little beauties like the Gay Hussar or something come in, you're like, well, that's interesting, but Quo Vadis is so utterly unique. I would be very hard to consider something else unless it was equally extraordinary. You know, same old story.
And did you reinvent yourself as a chef when you went?
Golly, there's a question. I think I found my stride. Because with Terence, I've lucked out. I didn't really, I only ever worked with great people who encouraged. And so I was allowed to do a lot of stumbling in the dark, you know, and trip up and pick myself back up and, you know, go, well, that dish didn't work, that didn't work. But they all went on the menu, and I was never edited, which in hindsight is remarkable, because that's very unusual and very rare. And Sam and I did the same. And they just said, no, that's great. Didn't like that one so much, but you know what you're doing, on you go. And so I think it's certainly notched up with me as a person and as a cook simultaneously. And also the great responsibility of this almighty building, you know, and its kitchens. I mean, it's been going for 26 years, and I think it's a classic case of, had I known what I was getting involved with, would you do it? I don't know, but I mean, it was so irresistible you couldn't not, you know. And so it was a massive learning curve very early on, and you didn't have to lash yourself to the mast to get on board, that's for sure.
And how much of the menu reflects your personality?
Well, hopefully all of it, you know. I love it when folks say, what should we have tonight? And I said, all of it, of course, you know. Nothing goes on unless I love it, you know. I mean, I want to eat all this food, and hopefully it all balances with each other, each dish. So no matter what you order, it works, you know. And that's a great game I enjoy playing.
And where do you find inspiration for new creations?
Well, it's funny. I love going to Italy, which is, in fact, great regional cooking, really. It's where all the dishes we love best and what we adore most at Quo Vadis come from, steeped in old French and Italian and Spanish. But because Britain's always had this extraordinary history of trade and import and export, and being a great merchant nation, there has always been a flourishing market for wonderful produce here. And that is what drives the menu more than anything else. As each ingredient appears, we just beat a path to its door immediately and just say, we'll take all of that. That's going on the menu. And if it's abundance, we might have 6 dishes with asparagus because it's only around for such a short period of time. Why not? And you don't have to eat them all. You just have to have one.
Well, I'm sure it's really lovely. Who would want to stop at one?
No, well, I think, you know, when it's there, have it all. You know, I'm a great believer in this one. You know, go guns.
So I read an article that said the flavors in your cooking were likened to the violence in an Oliver Stone movie. Did you take that as a compliment?
Huge. That was Euphorium. That was my very first review as a head chef from Emily Green, who was the great restaurant critic for The Independent in those days, now domiciled in America, Baltimore, I think. And she said, Lord, this chef, he serves up flavor the way Oliver Stone serves up violence. And I went, wow, that's going guns. And actually, yes, because there's often a case in the kitchen when the chefs are going, well, you know, get lots of herbs in there, you know, and I see this little bowl of chopped herbs. I'm like, more, you need a lot more than that. And they're like, more, you know. And so we thinking armloads, not handfuls, ladlefuls, not teaspoons, plentiful. And because I think one has got to be very aware of why would somebody beat a path to your door? And once they beat a path to your door and then been welcomed inside and sat down, you're going to expect them to spend hopefully a lot of money, because it doesn't come cheap running a building like Quo Vadis at all. Yeah. And so it has to be, you know, it has to deliver on every level. And one thing that I just adore are ingredients, and I like them, you know, to be of great flavour. Yeah. So I think it's a very, it's a shocking compliment, but a great compliment.
It's fabulous. I mean, I read it as the flavours were full on and you know exactly what to expect from the meal. And, you know, it's almost an attack on your senses. I love it.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, I firmly, I think what folk get, you know, because I think there are so many fears and worries and wants and allergens and things like, you know, that infiltrate our air now. One of the things that you can't possibly be frightened of is flavour.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on a little bit, I mean, will the Quo Vadis Friends series return once we get back to normal?
Oh gosh, yeah. I think one of the things that is our bedrock for the whole restaurant business is the camaraderie. And love and respect for everyone, for each other. And that comes through very clear, particularly where, you know, when the going's great, wonderful, we're all careering ahead. But when it's tough times, and this is hardly our first time in the rodeo, this is an extreme one, this is unprecedented, but this is, I think there will be a great bonding for everyone to get back together. Because it is not in anyone's interest that the restaurant business it'll limp for a while for sure. It's going to have lots of scars from these battles it's had, but it will recover. It has to. It's too good. And it had become so much better than it was. And I mean, you know, and it's harking back to a time when there were no restaurants. To think of Britain without a great restaurant business is unthinkable. And one of the things that we took great comfort from was the immediate moratorium on the restaurant business had conjured an extraordinary amount of concern from people in all corners, which was very wonderful, which was really wonderful, because we've been so glibly closed, you know, without any real seeming thought to what the consequences of that would be. That there's a wonderful thing, and I hope that people will, I'm sure, been delighting in all the food they've been cooking at home, but I don't think we can wait to get back to our restaurants.
I know, you've been out of the kitchen for so long now. And Quo Vadis has been standing strong since 1926. Do you think that there's a risk of closure?
I think at this stage, nothing is certain. And all we can do is just gird our loins and hope that we will get back to, I have to say, it was a mighty impressive heart bros endeavour to ensure that we were on board the second we knew about this coming in. And it was a very impressive thing. So when the moratorium came, it wasn't a horror show. It was shocking. of course, and upsetting.
Mhm.
And the furlough has been extraordinary, and so it's hats off and gratitude and abundance for that. But no, I think if you've survived 2 wars, a Cold War, recessions, the great going with the 36, great old Trojans know their way around, how to tread warily through these endeavours.
That is brilliant. And I mean, was there any thought to the delivery or takeaway type of service?
Oh, huge. The interesting thing with Soho is we can't even conceive of doing anything like until at the very least offices come back. And then you've got football. I think if we were in Hackney or we were in Stockwell or in Lambeth or somewhere with a big, huge domestic situation going on behind it, lots of folk living nearby. But while we're stuck in the Soho, it's not, because when I cycle in from Hackney, it's not until I pass Clerkenwell that the enormity of the situation crashes in on you and these desolate scenes on the streets and there's nobody there. That's quite a shocking, sobering time for sure.
So when we do get the green light to open up, how will you manage social distancing?
Good question. My gut feeling is I think folk are going to be so grateful for our return that I think they will be happily put up with all the restrictions we'll need to put in place. I mean, it's a wild shopping list of necessities, and you're like, okay, but until the government actually gives us a brief on what the actual restrictions are, we can't really say at this stage what they are. And I think the amount of gossip and rumour and conjecture flying around is literally remains just that until we actually get government controls put in place for us to return.
And I mean, are there any things you'll be doing differently?
Oh golly, I think there'd be a lot. I can't. I mean, the goal is to get back to what we were, obviously, but that I think will take a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
But in what shape and form? I look forward I think there's going to be the most amazing ploughman's lunch coming out of this. We're just going to make delicious, food that we don't normally get to do. I think could be quite an interesting thing to examine. And I look forward to that immensely.
Now you have a private room called the Marx Room, named after Karl Marx. He lived above your kitchen. Did he leave anything of interest?
No, just an extraordinary, but because he lived there, we got a blue plaque, and that's about it.
Okay.
There's lots of folk outside who go, expecting to be a little Karl Marx museum.
Right.
But a very old building like that, and you forget that was actually in the 19th century. So there's been a lot of changes since then. And so the rooms he inhabited right in the eaves of the building still there. And you do think the ghost of Karl Marx still was the indignities he suffered in that building. Exactly why we had a little thing called a Russian Revolution. Oops. So strange thoughts emanate there. But the ghosts, no, it's just fascinating that he's there. The most curious story about it is that he was moved by his friend Engels to Grafton's Street in Kentish Town, which is where my sister lived.
Right.
I said, well, my house doesn't have a blue plaque. And I went, no, but you're not a restaurant, dear. So, sorry about that. But a very odd, curious aside.
And is there's a Leone room as well? Who's that one named after?
Well, Peppino Leone was the founder of Quo Vadis. And he was the man who bought the first house in 1926. And on its success, that then acquired the other 4 houses that then created the whole of Quo Vadis. And Leone, it would be a bit wrong not to venerate that old darling, because it's his baby originally. So it's a homage to the founder.
And so the Quo Vadis and Friends, which room is that dinner in?
Oh, well, brilliantly. When Eddie left to go to Mallorca and James, the youngest Hart brother, came on board, we had a small posel of rooms at the back of the top floor. They never really did anything. They were sort of strange. It was a strange sort of room that just never quite worked. And so we pulled all the walls down and made it into a much more open thing. And what came unexpectedly out of it all was that we have now the whole top floor given over to this. So we feed, which can feed 70 to 80 people through these very gracious rooms, very beautiful. There's a wall of windows that runs the length of it. And the 4 dining rooms get laid up for all this series of friends who beautifully come and cook for us. And they're all, they're all amazing. So we look forward very much to that. We miss Thomasina Myers and Beren Jack, and there's been a couple of others that we all will miss, but we'll invite them back. We'll make no mistake, because it's a very fine series.
So tell us what the evenings consist of.
Oh, well, we discuss, well, it usually always starts with, yes, please, we'd love to come. And then there's discussion of what cocktail they'll have on arrival, what drink there is, and what's in season at the time. And then, brilliantly, most of them come very well organised, because it's a very eccentric kitchen we have in the basement of Quo Vadis. So we just say, don't prep here, just bring it all in readiness, to finish off there. And so the cooks arrive at, I suppose, between 3 and 4. And then to start the proceedings, we just take our guest, be it Angela Hartlett or Lee Tiernan for our Burns night, which she's done for 4 years now, and is just absolutely fantastic. And they get gonged all through the dining rooms and a big introduction made, and everyone huddles in the club, but they're brought upstairs to the dining rooms and are sat down. And it's a very wonderful, joyful occasion that folk get very much on board with. And because we're a club without swimming pools and rooms and, snooker tables and all the other things you might associate with that one, the one thing we really can offer our members is food and good cooking. And this they get very excited about. So we're very blessed from that point of view. Because most clubs are, and because we're a public and a private space, it's very rare for a club to have, review status. So food's a huge thing with us. So it's something we can offer and delight in very much.
So you co-hosted Could You Eat an Elephant with Fergus Henderson, and you did some very questionable things. What was the worst out of the bunch?
Oh, God. It was all pretty disgusting, really. They seemed hell-bent on testing our mettle. Both of us, each other, just said, just not that tough. Just not that butch. And so we kept outraging our director by saying we wouldn't eat rat. We certainly weren't going to eat an elephant. That's for sure. But we found amazing things along the way. Like beetles was an extraordinary one. There was while we were in Namibia, awaiting this dreadful business of shooting, it was like, what's that all about? But each day there would be another adventure, and there was a shocker involving porcupines that I won't, you'll turn green as the way I mentioned it. But this amazing thing when the women folk went out harvesting, and they would put their kids on their back and their fun, they would go out into the wilds and they plucked these jewel-like, scarab-like beetles from these tall willowy grasses. And then they would pound them in tubers in these extraordinary pestle and mortars. And then you were given this spoonful of, you were like, wow, okay, I know I'm going to deeply offend and insult you if I don't eat this, but this is not quite what I'm used to. And it was amazing. It set your tongue tingling, and suddenly you literally just had all the energy in the world. And you think, God, I could walk to Kilimanjaro and back again on this, and run up and down it twice. It was amazing. And that, I would have given my eye teeth to being able to bottle that and bring it home. It was just fantastic.
Oh, wow. Well, you're definitely very adventurous, that's for sure.
Oh, God, yeah, no, complete sap, utter sap.
So what's your opinion on molecular gastronomy, where kitchen meets chemistry?
Well, I mean, I think the kitchen is the most basic laboratory anyway. And, just even lighting a stove is science of some sort. I think it depends how interesting. What I feel very strongly, particularly about the British restaurant scene, is there has to be room at the table for everyone. Because if we all cook the same, it'd be a bit of a dull affair. So I think it's remarkable that you have, the waterside inns, cheek by jowl with the fat duck. And then you have the polar opposite of what I do and Fergus Henderson does, and Rochelle Canteen and all our other friends, and everything in between. And I think it's a vital part of our extraordinary and very vibrant restaurant scene and food scene here in the British Isles, which is incredible. It's utterly unique. And I think one needs and encourages and wants inquisitiveness, you know, and sometimes it goes into the most extraordinary places. But, you know, does it harm anyone? Of course not. And is it interesting? Of course it is. And is it to everyone's taste? Possibly not. But that's what's so much great fun about it.
Yeah. And I mean, when things return to normal, which luxury restaurant would you love to go back and dine in?
Oh, the River Cafe. You know, I've had so many great celebrations there of things, you know, and sad ones, you know, and so it's somewhere I go. It is somewhere I hold very dear. It's very special, and I think just the very fact that two women opened this up, you know, when they were a lot older, I just think it's remarkable.
Yeah, yeah. So you have a lovely quote: "Happy kitchens make happy food." How do you implement this message in your kitchen?
Well, it took a long time to get to. I mean, I'd always lucked out. I mean, I never worked in a kitchen where I had to say chef, or very rarely. I mean, if I did, I barely remember it. And I do think the more humanity that one can impose in the kitchen, the happier the environment.
Yeah.
And it's something we've struggled for. We've all gone through our terrible dips and troughs, and, you know, we've all come up with shocking hangovers and been as grumpy as hell, and, you know, stuff that we dare not even possibly try and remember. But generally, I think if you respect the people you work with and encourage them, and you have an environment which does encourage and grow, and a kitchen is a progressive place, and it's not a humdrum realm of which you're beaten down on a daily basis, I think it shows in the food.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as I say, I love that quote. It's
Thank you. Very
happiness. So describe yourself in 3 words.
loud, noisy, even louder.
Brilliant. And so, okay, so you've won awards for food writing, but you haven't released any cookbooks. Have you found time to think about?
Oh God! Well, you've rumbled me. Funny enough, I was just my next conversation is with my editor on a book we're working on now. And in fact, one of the strange things about this lockdown, I mean, you'd think being locked up at home alone with nothing to do would be a writer's dream. And of course, the thing is, you start courting the muse, and all these worrying thoughts and lurking thoughts come out, and you're like, oh no, we don't want those. So cooking much, and also becoming a long-term domestic cook, which I've not done since I was a child. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. So many new thoughts I've had as well on the subject. So one is on the way. It's incubating out of hibernation.
Oh, that's exciting.
Thank you very much. Looking forward to it very much indeed.
So if not a chef or a writer, what would you have been?
Gosh, well, I'll tell you what's been lurking in the shadows for a long time is I have a great love of illustration. My grandfather was, my father was, my brothers all work in arts and in film and production designers. So there's a strong gene of that in our family. And it's something I've been playing with while I've been locked up as well. A bit more, and rather enjoy, and quite freeform, to say the least. Not exactly trained.
Well, actually, I've seen some of your drawings on your Instagram page. Are they actually your drawings?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, they're lovely.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, I had great fun with those. And then whenever I post someone else's Instagram, they go, "Oh, that's a beauty," and I'm like, "Yes, that's not mine."
There are some beauties that are yours.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Barry. No, that's something I enjoy immensely, and I think that's something because we lucked out amazingly working with an illustrator called John Broadley at Quo Vadis, who we found through our glorious graphics man Julian Roberts at Irving & Co. And so we have our really stunning archive of illustration for the whole of Quo Vadis, which is amazing. Yeah. And so I think that will probably sit quite happily in the book as well, I think, too, as well as adorning the walls and the menus of Quo Vadis and all that we do.
Yeah, well, it sounds wonderful, and I can't wait to see it.
Thank you, Cotton. Bless your cotton socks. Thank you.
Jeremy, it's been a pleasure chatting with you today. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us.
Thank you for having me. What a joy. A lovely way to spend a Tuesday morning, my dear. Thank you.
Well, guys, if you want to follow Jeremy and see his wonderful drawings, you can follow him on Instagram, Jeremy Lee QV, and I'm on Posh Nosh Gal. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Shalina.
Bye.
Thanks. I'll take care. Bye-bye.